All right, and we're a go here. So thank you again.
We're not recording though, are we?
It is.
Oh, it is? Okay.
We are a go. We are a small enough group that I'd like to have you each just share with us who you are and from what district and school. So here's our team. We're small and mighty. So there's myself right there in the middle, flanked by Arlene Bobbin, who's on my right-hand side and who's here with me at Children's Institute. And then also Shelley Sination, who's the other co-director for Primary Project. So now that you know us, Mary, would you mind kicking us off and introducing yourself and where you're from?
Sure. Mary Crowley, I am from Gananda Central Schools, high school counselor and the lead teacher for the mental health department.
Perfect. Thank you. I always get Gananda and Gowanda confused, but you're just to the east side of Rochester.
Right. Yep. Right over the Wayne County border.
Perfect. Thank you. How about Dean?
My name is Dean James and I am the elementary school counsellor at Gananda.
Oh, welcome. And you've got this lovely accent too. Maybe you should do this presentation. How about you, Helene?
Good morning. My name is Helene Mantell, and I am the grants coordinator at the Ossining Union Free School District in Ossining, New York. And we're doing a lot of work with mental health in K through 12 in all the grades.
And can you give me a little geography lesson here? Ossining is where?
Well, Ossining is around 30 minutes north of New York City, and we're primarily known, or most famously known, for Sing Sing, the penitentiary. But,
okay.
So we're right on the Hudson River. It's actually very, very pretty. But if you go to Grand Central, the train station, it's just around a half an hour to 40-minute train ride north.
Nice, thank you. Rita.
Hi, good morning. My name is Rita Nilsson. I am the school social worker at Discovery Charter School. We're located in Greece.
Okay. And thank you. I know we just had some email communication back and forth, so I'm glad you could join.
Thank you.
And Justin?
Hi, I am a SEL team member and student support at Rochester Discovery as well, located in Greece.
Great, welcome. So just for planning, I have thrown this PowerPoint together to just give you an overview. So let me share kind of where we're headed this morning. Here's our agenda for today. So I'm going to give you an overview of what Primary Project is. We're going to talk a little bit about the application for funding and just some highlights to that. There's lots of resources on our website, along with the invite and the appendices. We will also be throwing this recording for this meeting onto our website after today. So if there's others from your team that weren't able to join and you want to share that with them, that's absolutely fine. We're going to talk about both the timeline of when this application is due, when we hope to notify schools, and what does that mean moving forward? And then also, where do you go for support and questions as you kind of dig into this and take a look at the application, and as you're plugging away and have questions, who do you reach out to? So we will share our contact information as well. I will encourage you to use the chat at any time for questions. Arlene is here and she's going to be monitoring that. I will pause after the program overview as well so that we can kind of catch up with the chat, address any questions. We are a small enough group so that if you would like to unmute and ask questions at that time, that's absolutely fine. And then we will do the same when we get through the application highlights and at the end, okay? So before I get started, any questions pressing on your end? Seeing none? So I think we can all agree that relationships matter in schools. High quality, positive, good relationships with students are key to academic engagement and learning. And for Primary Project, we are all about relationships. And in fact, that's the whole basis of this program. It's a relationship of what we call a child associate, who is the direct interventionist for this program and sees those students one-on-one as part of Primary Project. So I've included just a quick definition that this is an evidence-based Tier 2 intervention targeting K through 3 students experiencing mild, emphasis on mild, school adjustment difficulties. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we dig in the program overview. So because it's evidence-based and because Primary Project has been around over 6 decades, we know that this is a program with some parameters. So this is designed to help kids with school adjustment difficulties. And it's to help with those emerging difficulties. So not kids with major difficulties who could be better served by a higher tier intervention or support. It provides a caring adult for the student, and it's an early prevention Tier 2 program. And I like to say it's a therapeutic intervention. So just as we think about speech and language and OT and PT services for students, and even Tier 3 services for students, this is a therapeutic intervention. It's not focused on adjustment outside of school, even though we know for kids, there's lots happening in and outside of school. It's not for students with severe difficulties, so I think I'm driving that point home already. And it's not a program that provides therapy or tutoring. It's a therapeutic intervention, which we use a child-centered theoretical base, but we're very careful not to call it play therapy because of the range in which we have schools hire child associates and the experience that they bring to that position. And it's not a treatment program. So, Primary Project is built on 6 foundational components, and I'm going to take you through each of these. On our website, there is also a video called Creating Connections that's listed in the resource section for the application. So I'm going to go through this. That video also does a very nice job of going through those 6 core components as well. So if you want to hear it in another way, that's available to you as well and to share with staff. So core component number 1 is work with young kids who are identified through systematic screening and selection, who are provided support by child associates. Those child associates are supervised by the school-based mental health professional, and it's implemented according to standards. So there's a program evaluation piece to this intervention. And just as we think about multi-tiered systems of support, it should be integrated within the fabric of the school. So I'm going to dig into each one a little bit here. I think all of you being school-based people have seen kids who are experiencing mild school adjustment difficulties. Often we see kids after the start of the school year. Some embrace learning very enthusiastically, are excited to be back in the classroom, and there's some students that continue to have a hard time 3, 4, 5, and 6 weeks into the start of the school year. Those are often sometimes the kids that we see just above that adjusted base of the pyramid, right? So those kids that are starting to bubble into that Tier 2, needing some additional support. So those kids who may not be responding fully to universal interventions, those kids who may still be a little shy, withdrawn, having difficulty controlling some behavior and impulses, maybe have difficulty managing and maintaining peer relationships. and who are maybe not engaged in their learning day. So things like not taking initiative for assignments, not staying focused on things in the classroom. So those are kind of the behaviors that we often see for primary project. And then, we have a couple school-based mental health professionals here today too. So beyond that, there are those upper parts of the pyramid, those kids that kind of fall to those higher tiers and who are better served by either school-based mental health professionals, other tier 3 services, or outside community resources. So core component number 2. This is systematic screening and selection. So why do we screen and who do we screen and how? We screen all kids in the targeted grade levels. So I have said that primary project is for kids K through 3, and that's what this funding is targeted. You will see on some of our materials, primary project can go pre-K to 3. This funding is specific to kindergarten through 3rd. So those are the identified students. Your district and schools decide which grade levels you want to serve. So some schools may only do K and 1, some may do K through 3, some may do K through 2, etc. So I think you kind of see, you get to decide which grade levels you want to focus in on. Whatever your decision is, we screen all those kids in the grade levels that are identified using a teacher-child rating scale. So this is a normed and validated measure providing some SEL data on 4 areas, which are the 4 that I just mentioned on the last slide. So it's task orientation, behavior control, assertive social, and peer sociability. Okay. It's a short measure. There's 2 versions of it. The longer version is 32 items. The shorter version is 20 items. And you decide which version you want to use. It takes, the 32 item takes teachers about 2 minutes to complete. It's screening, it's not assessment. So we just want a snapshot in time of how kids are doing. Screening is conducted 4 to 6 weeks into the start of the school year. Our recommendation is that if you're seeing kindergarten students, you save screening for kindergarten kids until mid-year. So oftentimes that early January window. This data can also be used by school-based mental health professionals, not only for primary project, but to think about other support services as well. So if it's a kid who scores in the high risk area on all 4 scales, something's really going on with this student. What other interventions can we connect him or her to? So it can be used beyond primary project. If your district is using some other SEL measure, you do not have to use the teacher-child rating scale for screening. However, you will have to use it as a pre-post measure on the students that are served. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The selection piece is a team decision. So it's usually led and facilitated by the school-based mental health professional with input from the child associate who might have done some classroom observations, as well as teacher input. And all guided by that screening data that you have in front of you. There is a parent permission form. Best practices is that it's copied onto your letterhead, signed by your building principal, and oftentimes teachers can play a critical role in helping to pave the way with that parent permission at the onset of the intervention. Oops. Core components 3 and 4 is the staffing. So who is part of what we call this core team? And the first one is the child associate. They're the ones who are the heart and soul of primary project. They are the ones that are hired by you, the school or the district. Often they're hired in as a teacher aide, paraprofessional, whatever that job title is in your district. We do have some language around a child associate position and job description, and I'm looking at Arlene, if that's on our website or included in any of our appendices.
I don't think so. I have to look.
So now that I'm talking this through, we may want to put that up on our website so we can throw that in there as well. And that'll, if you want to include any of that language into your district job description, then that's absolutely fine. This person's main responsibility is to work with children. And at their core, since districts are hiring this person, the key quality that we really look for and can't be taught is genuineness, right? So it's somebody who can really be authentic and genuine in working with kids. Somebody who can really have those great relationships, build great relationships with students and staff in the building. So these are usually people who really enjoy working with kids. They have an ability to let children be children. They can be playful. They're warm and caring and just have, again, radiate these skills. Those are the kinds of people that you want to look for this position. The mental health professional, again, is really the leader of primary project at the building level. This is the person who is managing the day-to-day activities, overseeing screening and selection, facilitating those conferences with teachers, helping to identify the right kids for this intervention. Okay. There is an ongoing program evaluation piece, right? So as we think about doing evidence-based programs and as districts take on programs, there's two ways that we can think about data. One is, and this is the most important piece, I think, is really using your program evaluation data as a way to look at your program and how do you continually refine it and improve it year after year. And that's what we want districts to be able to do with these measures and the data that you're collecting. The other is certainly to share with stakeholders, right? So teachers, administrators, district level administration, to really kind of share what impact this program is having for our students at our school. And that ties into sustainability. And I'm going to talk about that in the grant as we get into the application for funding and what happens beyond the 3 years. These reports, as well as the teacher-child rating scale, all of those measures are available in what's called COMET, which is a web-based application that houses that suite of measures. So in the appendices, you will see something titled the COMET Cost Calculator, which you will complete and include with your application and will become part of your budget. So I will talk a little bit more about that when we get into the application. The last core component is really integration into the school community. And again, as we think about primary project and how it connects with other support services in a multi-tiered system of support within the school, we don't want it to be a standalone program. We don't want it to be a program that a district says, well, we just have this funding for 3 years and then the program is going to go away. We really want this to be built into and have value to your multi-tiered system of support and how you support kids. And then certainly district sustainability beyond the life of the grant. So I am going to pause there before I get into the next piece because I'm through the core components And I've got a few more slides, but I've been talking a lot. So I just want to check in with all of you and see what questions you might have.
I have a question. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the process and what the grant entails. So this is grant funding to support an individual, so an actual child associate, and then also the mental health professional, or to fund somebody who's already on staff here who does this work. Or when I first read the information, I thought you were providing the child associates as sort of experts in the field who would come in, and that's why I couldn't quite understand how this would work. But now I guess I think I understand it differently, that the funds are to cover those two individual roles. Is that the case?
Yes, so think of it this way, Helena, if this is helpful. Children's Institute is the developer of Primary Project. We created this program. We have the research that supports it, and we have the resources. As part of this funding, our role is to support schools across New York State and nationally through consultation and training. So that's our role. And this is how we grow Primary Project in New York State, is offering this application. Districts really take this program on as part of a tiered support within your continuum of support for students. So you're responsible for hiring or identifying the child associate, as well as dedicating the mental health support, so that school-based mental health professional. When I talk about the application, I'll go into the budget a little bit, and I can share more about what that looks like.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions before I keep going? Okay. So typically in a year, we can do 2 cycles of seeing students. So as we think about, most kids are served. So by the time we complete screening 4 weeks into the start of the school year, most programs are getting going with kids by the end of October, early November. It's 12 to 15 weeks is considered a cycle. Kids are seen weekly for about 30 to 40 minutes. If you're a school that's going to be screening kindergarten mid-year, there's lots happening this middle part of the year. So there's screening, there's selection, and then getting ready for that next cycle that goes sometime around February until the end of the year. Okay, so again, this is early intervention prevention. If we're picking the right kids, most kids will make improvement and progress after 1 cycle of program. There are some kids that could benefit from more than 1 cycle, and that's really at the clinical judgment of the school-based mental health professional and the input that you're getting from both the associate and the teacher. So where is this intervention done, right? So it's location, location, location. As we think about real estate in schools, that can be pretty tight. But for Primary Project, we really like schools to commit and think about, and this falls under readiness of the application, is where will this program be delivered to students? So where is the playroom going to be? It does not have to be a huge space. So you see this picture in this slide. This is a fairly small space filled with a lot of what we call expressive toys. So when we think about expressive toys, there's no right or wrong way in playing with these things. So oftentimes we see things like real life, kids experience in real life. So you see kitchen sets, baby dolls, family figures, animals, all of that stuff. We see some creative media, which is essentially lots of arts and crafts stuff. You know, just blank paper, crayons, markers, pens, construction paper. And then we see some acting out and aggressive things. So something like Play-Doh, where kids can experience these items and experience a range of feelings when using these items. So Play-Doh can be very calming and soothing for kids that just want to press it and mold it. And it can also be something where kids can get really mad at it and ball it up and smash it, okay? So those are the kinds of things that we want to include in primary project playrooms. Oftentimes it is a battery-free zone, always, not oftentimes, always. There are no electronics included in primary project playrooms. We also do not find books, puzzles, board games in primary project playrooms. And you might say, why? Because they have rules attached to them, and there's a very specific way of doing those things. If you are a building that's really tight on space, and primary project has to be shared with another service provider, that's fine too, but ideally it should be that schedules may not overlap, you know, that it still provides some confidentiality for students who are being seen as part of the program, things like that. So in this intervention, we use play. This follows a child-centered theoretical underpinning. So a child-centered play therapy theoretical underpinning. Why do we use play? Because this is what kids at this age do best. This is their natural language, is playing in kindergarten through 3rd grade. Children have, what makes this different, these child-led play skills, is that kids get to decide where this relationship goes. We know that as part of this theory of child-centered work, it's just as we think about infants, right? So we can't speed up kids' ability to go from being infants and where they continually lay on their back to when they're ready to start rolling, to when they're starting to pull up and using a table or something to support them, to when they're ready to take off and start walking and running. Kids grow at a rate and develop at a rate that works for them, right? So we can do all of the great things around those reflective skills of saying, oh, you're pulling yourself up on that table, you're getting so close to walking. Those are the same kinds of skills that we use in the primary projects playroom. So all of that reflective language. And we know that kids take this relationship to where they want it to be. So I'm going to pause again, because now we're going to start digging into the application and the key points and highlights. So other questions about the core components, the intervention. No? Okay. So if you have read the application for funding invite, you will have gathered some key highlights. So this is funding, a maximum of funding of $15,000 per school, and that's available for up to 2 schools in a district. So if you are a district that wants to include funding for 2 of your elementary buildings, your max award would be $30,000 in year 1. This funding is declining grant dollars in years 2 and 3. So we have a nice example in here that if you submit to us an application for $15,000 to support one school, you will receive 75% of that award in year 2, which you see the amount there on the PowerPoint. And in year 3, you will get 50% of the initial award. So again, this funding is really designed to be seed funding in your district or school so that your school sees the value of this. It's built into and part of your tiered system of support. And then you are able to maintain and sustain this program beyond the grant period. Okay. So money cannot be used for programs in a school that have implemented either this year or in the last 3 years. If you're out of that range, so we have some schools that have dropped program, come back interested in starting the program up. As long as you are outside of that 3 years, you are welcome to submit an application. This is for September startup, September 22 startup. And our expectation is, these last couple of school years have been challenging to say the least. But our expectation is that you're able to start program and get program going so that hopefully you're successful in completing 2 cycles of seeing students as part of primary project. There's introductory training for child associates, supervisors, and if there is somebody identified on your application as the project coordinator. The principals of buildings are required to be part of the foundational training, which goes through the overview components, the intervention, how we pick kids, and they are required to be part of that foundational training. In addition to that basic training, there is also a supervision specific training just for mental health professionals. So there are requirement of 2, the 1 foundational training and then the supervision training just for mental health professionals. So again, this is to start September 2022. Applications are due electronically to Arlene by March 11th. And our plan is to notify you this June of 2022 prior to you heading out on summer break. It's not that far away. So what goes into thinking about the review of these applications? Certainly quality of application and available funding are the 2 main factors of how we award programs. So your application contents, all of these appendices are listed on our website, and I will shift over and show you where those are on our website as soon as I get through this slide. But there's the link. There's a checklist that just helps you organize your application. There's a cover letter that's required from your district superintendent, face page, which is the appendix to your school information page. The abstract and narrative is really going to be the meat and potatoes of your application and how you really plan to implement and roll out this program at your school. You're going to attach a resume of who's going to be the supervising mental health professional, the budget and the budget narrative. And then I had mentioned earlier that there's that common cost calculator, which also will feed into your budget. If you want to include any additional attachments that you think would be helpful for your application, you are welcome to do that as well. So budget suggestions, and I can pull up what the budget will look like. You can include money for child associate salaries and benefits. You cannot request grant funding for mental health support. The reason being is that as a school-based mental health professional, this helps you so that you are not focused on those milder school adjustment difficulties. Rather, you give your skills away to this child associate and work collaboratively with that person so that you're expanding your reach in buildings. Okay, so this is really seen as a benefit, so that funding does not support the supervision of the mental health professional. It can support, you can request money for that COMET piece, so for the screening and the evaluation measures, and that's going to vary by building and school based on size. Your primary project resources, that's a one-time fee, which you will include in year one. And those resources come from us. That includes a program development manual and other DVDs, companion guides, etc. Playroom supplies, we limit the amount of the playroom supplies to 500 per building. You can adequately equip a playroom for that amount of money. The training, there is no registration fee for those two trainings that I mentioned, that foundational training and the supervision training. Those fees are waived and we're able to cover those through this grant funding. If there's other statewide training that we offer, those sometimes have a registration fee. So if you want to, you can include in the training line some money for registration fees, either from us or other training across the state that could be relevant and related to primary project. So that's the key there, related to primary project. And you can include travel expenses. So this year we have been doing training virtually. It would be nice to be able to gather with our newly awarded sites and the staff rather than doing virtual trainings. We will see what next year brings. So here are our contact information. I'm doing this morning, so Shelley's listed on the PowerPoint as the contact person. However, you can feel free to reach out to me as well. I will throw my email in the chat, and Arlene, who is here and she really helps to coordinate this process, is also a great resource. So you have my email there. I am going to stop share and then I am going to share. On our website, if you go to the program page, so when you get to our landing page for Children's Institute, you'll go to Programs and Services, you'll go down to Primary Project, and then you'll see a button that'll get you to this whole page, which is the New York State application for funds. So here is where all of these appendices are listed. These are these additional resources. I mentioned this Creating Connections video. That's also a nice overview with the 6 core components. You can take a look at these measures here, and we will also throw up that sample job description in there as well. So, any other questions for us here that would be helpful?
The comment, the screening tool, you said we could use if we already have an in-house one, we could use that, but then it sounded like in order for program evaluation, we have to use the comment.
Yeah, so let me tell you that, Mary, if you're already using an SEL measure to help identify students and triage students for other interventions, such as the BIMUS, Panorama, there's lots of other competitors out there. So if you're using something systematically, you'll want to include that in your application as to what you're already doing. That is fine if you want to do that as part of your screening process. However, as part of this funding, we still report aggregate outcomes to NYSED for primary projects. So if you're receiving funding from us, you still have to do that COMET cost calculator for the number of kids that you plan to serve for pre-post TCRS along with the other measures. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
so that's, yeah, so that will, there's basically no way around including that in the cost of that. If we want that covered by the grant, that needs to be included.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, it's part of our funding requirement that we report back to NYSED for those aggregate outcomes and how programs are faring.
I have a couple of questions. You may have answered this at the very beginning, I'm not sure, but how many grants or projects do you anticipate being able to fund for the next academic year?
So that's a great question, Helene. We are in the process, so our funding has remained the same from New York State for a number of years. How many programs we fund depends on how many applications we get, the quality of those applications, and the funds that are available. So we won't know until we're in the review process.
Only 7 to 8.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. Also, I'm just trying to put this all into sort of budget finance perspective.
Sure.
Because that's my role more than being in the mental health or, profession or that aspect with the schools. So $15,000 for the first year, that's to cover the cost of a child associate coming on board and doing this sort of evaluation. And then, over the next 2 years, it goes down. And then there are other expenses related to this. So I'm trying to understand how this works, because if our district needs to hire a child associate, then obviously there has to be other funding to subsidize this $15,000, because that's, obviously not going to cover that person's salary. But I'm just curious how other projects have done this. Maybe I'm not understanding the full perspective of this, but if we're going to be recruiting someone to do this, what else would be supporting this? This wouldn't be a full-time job, I'm guessing. Is this like an internship for someone or a part-time position? I'm trying to understand, how this person fits into the grant and then is complying with the rules of the project.
Sure. So you got a lot wrapped up in that question. So let me see if I can tease it out a little bit. So yes, I threw the budget. So this is the template that is part of the application. In terms of child associates, you can budget salaries and benefits. So a question that I think you have wrapped up in there is, how do I determine the level of resources that I need in terms of a child associate? And that's going to depend on how many kids you're screening and plan to serve. So I'm going to take round numbers because that's easiest for me. But if you decide to see K through 2 at your elementary building, and let's say that you have 300 students, you have about 100 kids at kindergarten, you have 100 at first, and you have 100 at second. You're going to screen 300 kids. For a social emotional program like Primary Project, you would expect to get about 10 to 15% of that total screened population who would be eligible for a program like Primary Project. So we screen 300, we get about 30 kids. That's for the year, right? So I could hire probably around a 17-hour position to serve about 15 kids in the first cycle and 15 kids in the second cycle. Does that make sense? Now, you may identify somebody at your school building who already is maybe a part-time employee who could be a great fit for primary project, and now you make them full-time. So there's lots of creativity to how you budget this child associate, okay? I wanted to go back though and kind of talk about that screening and numbers served, because that's really what's going to help drive how many hours do I really need somebody as part of this position. And Helene, I think the other piece to your question is that districts really have to see value in this to really, it's not going to fund the entire program. Depending on what you budget for a child associate, your resources, training, your evaluation piece, you may get most of it covered in first year. However, this is declining funds in years 2 and 3. And we want districts, it's intentional, right? Because we want districts to be able to continue to sustain it, see value in it, and continue to sustain it and become part of your support services for kids. Does that help?
Yes, and I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to log off. There are electricians here and they're going to cut out my my internet access. So
No worries. I think I've heard
it's
it all.
always
at this
crazy.
point, like-
I'll be back. I'll probably be back, but I'll disappear for a little while. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Helene.
Thank you. I may be back.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions about the budget, the use of Comet, how you plan for child associate time?
If we have, so if we have a community program that comes in and delivers services, can we, double dip isn't the right term, but if we have this idea that maybe somebody that comes in for that level of support could be the one to deliver the primary project stuff, is there an issue with doing that?
So what's the, so thinking about another support service that's already provided at the school, and maybe you know the person who's providing that intervention, and maybe they would be a good candidate for primary project 2, and
Right.
creating, so like would the idea be creating a full-time position for that person?
So we have an outside agency that we have that's working with our district full-time. And so there's 2 people coming in, and one of them, we're using for certain things right now, but there's a possibility that this is a better use of their time, or at least a portion of their time, like you were talking about, not necessarily a full-time thing, but a part of their time could potentially be delivering this. In that way, the salary is essentially already covered. So the grant funding could be used for other purposes. Is that allowable, or is that kind of a non-starter?
I would say it's allowable as long as that's going to fit with kind of the vision of where you're headed with primary projects. Like if you see that as a sustainable way to keep going with this program, and that other level of funding is going to continue to support that person, then you don't have to budget for those paraprofessional salaries. As long as that person's going to be dedicated, and that's going to be their role, is to see kids as part of primary project, then that's fine. You could think about this budget as a zero-based budget. Just build it of what you need. So maybe you don't even submit a budget for 15,000. You only come up with a budget of like 11,000 in your first year. That's fine too. You don't have to try and meet that mark of 15,000.
I think, at least for Gananda, and Dean, you can correct me if I'm misspeaking, but I think that's kind of where we're going, is like, is there a way to shift duties to make it a more streamlined and evidence-based program, what this person is doing, instead of, we're kind of piecemealing what they're doing right now. And this would be kind of a much more structured and evidence-based opportunity for them to deliver the things that our students need, but without necessarily having the salary as the big hurdle.
Yeah. And I guess if you would see that person as kind of having all of those qualities that we think about as a child associate. And again, child associates are not, typically when Primary Project was first developed, the developer of this, Emery Cowan, it was really moms with young children whose kids had gone back to school and they were looking for something to do on a part-time basis that fit within their child's school schedule and just wanted to get out of the house. So if you think of it that way, these are typically people who just have lots of great life experience and they are able to create great relationships with kids. Oftentimes those with mental health backgrounds and teachers are not the best people to fill this role. Because it's really just a relationship-based program.
Okay.
The other thing is again, going back to that budget piece, you build your budget where you need to. There's some required first year things. So I threw that budget template up there. You'll see for supplies and materials, that's where you'll include those program resources. You'll also include your $500 for playroom supplies. Under the program data and evaluation line, that's where you're going to plug in your COMET costs that you figure out on that COMET cost calculator. Mary, is Gananda already using systematically a screening measure for SEL?
Yeah, so we are using it's evidence-based, but it's kind of a free screening tool that we have our teachers complete 3 times a year for the students in their classes.
And what is it?
The SRSS.
Okay, yep. So you'll just want to include that in your application. So if you're already doing that, you'll just say that our plan is that we'll do this, and if it fits within what you're already doing as a district in terms of the timing of it and how you would pick kids based on that measure. So again, we're looking at that mild to moderate school adjustment difficulties. So how do you use that tool to inform what kids would be eligible for Primary Project? Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for your time. We appreciate you jumping on and hearing more about Primary Project and the application. This is a great opportunity for New York State schools. We hope that by March 11th, we see one from each of you. So if you have questions along the way, feel free to reach out to Arlene, myself, or Shelley. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.